Here we go again. Okay, the last time I worked on this thing, I got a floppy drive working. Not the correct floppy drive, but a floppy drive. But I didn't get the hard drive working because I broke the ribbon, and it's still broken. There are ways to fix this. I looked on YouTube, and the most common way is to like scratch the coating off the thin wire connectors in here, and you can solder to them. But I don't know what kind of plastic they use, but you can't get it to separate from the connectors. So I'm not saying I'm throwing in the towel, but yeah, this is on the shelf. But I do have a plan. And it's a shame too, because I managed to switch out the caps on the controller board here. Obviously, I didn't have any surface mount ones that were the right size and capacitance, so I kind of bodged it with these through holes. But if it works, it works. But obviously, that's not the main problem anymore. Okay, so if you remember the last time, this is not the original floppy disk drive. This is a regular clone floppy drive, I guess you could say, although I did manage to get the PS2 style button on there, and it hasn't broke off yet, which is good. But the problem is, when you have the cover on, the slot in the front just barely doesn't line up with the slot in the bezel. So this is sitting up just a little too high, so it's kind of hard to get the disc in and out. But I have a plan for that too, because I'm thinking the angle is just a little bit off, right? So if I could just get it to sit a little more this way and correct for it a little bit, then I could get it to line up better, and then it will line up with the bezel better, presumably. So what I've done is I've got these nylon washers here, and I'm going to see if I can use these to shim up the floppy drive under there, so I can change the angle of it. So I'm going to just loosen off the front ones just a bit, and back ones can come all the way out. I don't think I'm going to need that much. I think I'm going to try with 2. Ooh, I might not be able to do 2. I might not have enough space. I'm just gonna barely thread that in. And I guess these could have been metal washers too. I just picked the nylon ones because I didn't remember if there's anything on the bottom of the drive that I don't want to conduct electricity. And this way I don't have to worry about it. But you can see the little shim in there. It ever so slightly raises the drive off the sled and changes the angle just a little bit. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but we can always put more in, I suppose. Worst case Ontario, I have to get longer screws, but... Okay, let's see if this lines up any better. It's still too tall. I don't know if I can get a good shot of it, but the button is just too high, and it's interfering, so I gotta push the case down a bit. Okay, now it's in. You just gotta finagle it a little bit. And let's see how a disc fits in there. It's actually a little bit better, but you still can't eject it. So, more shimming. And there we are. 2 washers. There it goes. Ooh, that slid in pretty nicely. Okay, see if I can get a disc in there. It still pushing against the top, but it goes in. Okay. 3 washers on each side. You know what? I think that might actually be making the problem worse now. I think maybe it's unavoidable. The front end's just got to come down. Yeah. Okay, well, that isn't working. Oh well, it was worth a shot. But in the meantime, I got this. This is the MCIDE CF from ZZXIO. I think that's how you pronounce it. Basically, it's an MCA adaptation of the XT IDE, a homebrew IDE controller card for old PCs with MFM hard drives. Thank you for your order. Support information and the ADF file are available at that address. We hope it brings you many years of PS2 enjoyment. ZZXIO looks forward to releasing additional electronics to enhance these iconic machines. Wow, and they really, like the logo, they really stayed true to the aesthetic. Normally I prefer to keep things original, but that's not always possible. Sometimes old parts are just more trouble than they're worth, and that's where the MCIDE comes in. This thing will let us use the far easier to find IDE drives in our retro MCA machines, and the CF version, like this one here, even allows us to use compact flash cards, which is the way I chose to go. I gotta say, that looks quite nice. They really, it really looks like a solid product. They really did a nice professional job. I chose the CF version because you can use it both as a hard drive and as removable storage, which makes it so much easier to transfer files between your PS2 and your modern PCs. By the way, if you didn't know, compact flash cards are basically almost like miniature IDE drives, at least in terms of the electronics, so the designers didn't need to do much to support it. With the MCIDE CF, you get 2 CF slots, one internal and one externally accessible through the back slot of the card, and an IDE connector, so you can use a conventional spinning disk drive. They also included a Molex plug on the card, which is really nice to provide power, as a lot of PS2 power supplies don't have that standard Molex power connector. Okay, so to start off, before I even install the card, what I'm going to do is I'm going to boot off the reference disk, and I'm going to go to copy an option diskette. And since I'm kind of lazy, I don't always do it this way, but this is the way you're supposed to do it. Now it's telling me to put the option diskette in, move the ref disk, and I'm going to put in the disk that came with the MCIDE, like so. And it's going to quickly copy the ADF file. Now it's going to have you swap the disk back. And it's going to copy that to the reference disk, so when I boot, it's going to have the ADF file, and it's going to recognize the MCIDE adapter. And I can go exit. So let's power it off for a moment. And let's install the card. Now I could install it in this slot here, because this is a 16-bit card. You can see the length of the connector, that it matches up with this. Well, these 2 slots are 32-bit. But you can see this slot is a little bit different. This has what's called the AVE, or auxiliary video extensions, on there. So this is made specifically for a video card. Now this has VGA built into it, so I don't need an extra video card. Part of me wants to keep that slot free for a video card, but I don't know. I'm going to put it in a 32-bit slot anyway. But you can take out the slot blank like that. These are what the slot covers look like. And I might as well move it back here for now. And that's a bit tight too. And you can see it's not really sitting right. I do think that the back of this is a little bit bowed, because you can see how the slot cover isn't fitting into the slot. Yeah, that's a bit better. Still probably not perfect, but again, I think it's the computer that's not perfect. And like I said, everything on these computers is pretty tight. One thing you want to take into consideration is you got the Molex connector for power here. So if you're going to be using like an actual hardware full-size IDE drive, you're not going to be able to plug it in because it's going to this top shelf is going to interfere with it. So one thing to be mindful of that. Personally, I'm just planning on using the CF card, and I'm probably not going to use that. But if you are, just maybe put it in the middle slot. All right, let's boot her back up. Got the reference disk in the drive. Okay, so back at the reference disk, and you can see that I've got a 165 error. So it's detecting that there is a card in there that wasn't in there before. So it's asking me to automatically configure the system. So I'll hit yes. And it's going to recognize the card because I already copied the option diskette before I did this. Automatic configuration program is complete. Press enter to restart. Okay, here we go. So if I boot back into the reference diskette and I go set configuration and I view my configuration, I go down, I can see, hey, there's my MC IDE. So let's go back one level. If I go to change configuration, then I should be able to change some of these settings. Let's see, F6 for next. So this is where it puts where in memory the ROM's going to go. And I don't think it matters because I don't think there's anything else that's taking that memory right now. Maybe I should explain some of these settings. The option ROM contains the MC IDE BIOS, which has code that allows your system to boot off one of the attached drives. So the system will find that ROM chip on startup and execute the code there, which will start the bootstrap process for one of the IDE devices. If you don't plan on booting off an IDE drive, I believe you can just set this to none and the computer will boot from the stock hard drive or from the floppy disk. Otherwise, you can pick basically anything really. You're just telling the PC where that ROM chip will get mapped into memory at. It shouldn't let you choose an address that conflicts with another device, which is of course one of the big selling points of the whole microchannel system. The MCE IDE has two IDE channels, channel A and channel B, each of which can have two devices attached to it. In this case, I believe channel A is the CF card slots, and channel B is for the IDE connector. For each channel, we can designate one of the two drives as a master, and this is the first device that the computer will check for a boot sector, and thus the device that'll come first in the boot order. So you can see that for the compact flash master, I chose the internal card, since I plan to use the internal card as a hard drive, and the external card for transferring files. I just disabled the B channel altogether since I don't plan to use it, and I set the interrupt to none. So I've got this 1 gigabyte compact flash card off Amazon. It's like 25, 30 bucks, I think. It's kind of overkill for a 386, but it was actually cheaper to get a 1 gig card than like a 256 or 512 meg. This goes in the slot like that. Yeah, you really can't see that very well, but... And that's what it looks like. Switch back on. Now, yep, there's the ROM. And interestingly, it thinks it found the card, but it thinks it's a slave. And that's really strange that the card seems to have DOS pre-installed on it. Version 7.1. But there's nothing on the card. I don't understand. Is that in ROM? I still have the reference disk in there too, so it's kind of curious it didn't boot off that. So I would give it a Control-Alt-Delete. F2. Yeah, so you get a boot menu. Look at that. That's pretty swanky. Yeah, ROM boot, there you go. That's pretty impressive. That's like a feature you would, a boot menu is like a feature you would expect on a more modern computer. I'm quite impressed with that. Yeah, I did set the internal compact flash to be the master. What if I set it to external? Save. And it's still at the slave. Okay, I don't know what's up with that, but that is not a big deal. Can I go format C? No, it doesn't have format in ROM, so I still got to get like a DOS boot disk. C DOS run. Run, DOS run. Sure. Okay. Install is complete. Press any key. It doesn't seem to be any key. Well, that's not good. Okay, boot disk. And go. So why won't it boot again? Does it not have command.com? It does. Do I have to reformat and try it again? Sure. Format C. /S for system files. No, let's do a quick format. Screw it. I just want to see if we can get DOS booting on this thing. Yes, I'm aware of that. Insufficient memory to... Oh, the drive might be too big for it. 1 gig might be too old. Well, I can F-disk it though. Right? Man, it's been a long time since I used this. Primary DOS partition. Yeah, I think gigabyte is too big for FAT16. So I gotta delete that partition. Ugh, what the hell? Volume label, B. CF card. Whoops. CF card. That was suspiciously fast. And I just want to see if it'll boot. Ah, it boots. So there's that. Create primary. New. Let's give it, I don't know. Can I do 512? Let's give it 512. Let's go half and half. Extended. Okay. The logical drives defined, yep. So I have 2 drives. So what I like to do is I like to have 1 partition for my OS and 1 partition for my data. That way if I truly screw up and hose the operating system, I can just format it, my data's still there. So I call the primary one OS, and the secondary one I'll call data. Data. Yeah. So now if I reboot, it still boots to basic. It wasn't supposed to boot to basic. 2-finger salute. Set active partition, maybe that was it. Yay! Meanwhile, I made these. Some truly awesome people in the 3D printing community have been making 3D models of these old PS2 parts and sharing them, including this floppy drive cradle I found on Thingiverse. The only problem is I don't own a 3D printer. But now, thanks to my job, I at least have access to one. And I'll say right off the bat that I'm a total noob to this. These are my first attempts at printing anything, so if they look like absolute garbage, well, that's because they are. They turned out to be like Swiss cheese, or maybe burnt toast is kind of the consistency. They just crumble. So that being said, this one looks solid enough to test with. Disc test. And I can tell, yeah, same problem. So, alright, experiment time. Got apply glue stick, piece of sandpaper. So I start sanding. And yeah, I kind of figured it wouldn't work first try, so I tried sanding it down a bit, taking off little bits at a time until I get the height I wanted. Yeah, still too high. Yeah. I thought it wouldn't be too hard to creep up on the right height, but after a few rounds of sanding, all I got was a sore hand. So I decided to see if I could cut the model down a little bit before I printed it instead. Now, I've never done any 3D modeling before, but it turned out I actually didn't need to. I was able to shrink the part down in the slicer by about 10% on the vertical axis only, and I actually got a half-decent print this time. Unfortunately, I lost a bunch of my footage here, so this is the only shot I have of the shorter cradle. In the process, I broke the ejector button off the front from all the testing and taking it out and putting it back in, so I glued it back on with some epoxy this time. Hopefully that can hold it on there better. And I also had a couple of the power wires on the TechSelect floppy adapter break off. Again, from all the flexing and installing and removing the drive, so off camera I just quickly soldered them back on. Yet another inconvenience to deal with, but at least after all that effort, the result was worth it. The floppy drive lines up nicely, the disk loads and ejects smoothly, and it looks practically identical to the original drive. And with that, the Model 70 is finally fixed. It might not be all original or even period correct, but at last, it is a usable computer. And that'll do it for this one. Thanks everybody for watching me through this incredibly frustrating restoration. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon.